Hey out there in YouTube land, is Slayer again. Um, Today's got another episode of the Confessions of a DSL Technician, where I talk about some of the issues I used to deal with in my past career and working with um, in the telecommunications industry and DSL and kind of the early days of broadband service. Um, Today I kind of thought about talking about one of the things I really hated about my job, and uh, kind of reasons why it often happened. Uh, Basically, there's a lot of technical details which I'm going to try and gloss over. Um, Sometime later, I might do another episode where I kind of go into more details about what's involved and how DSL works and whatnot. But today I'm going to try to simplify everything just for conversation's sake. But basically, um, one of the more frustrating things I often had to deal with was referred to as denial of service, which basically is um, we, after some discussion or examination and determination, whether or not a customer can be provided service by our current equipment. Um, this is kind of rather frustrating, especially considering that a lot of times this will happen when a customer is supposed, on the due date of when the customer is supposed to get service. Um, and in a little bit, you'll kind of understand why this was so frustrating. Um, Basically, there's kind of two things at play here. First off, this is where a lot of technical details go in, but for simplicity's sake, broadband service requires the transmission of a lot of high frequencies signals to provide the data connection and the bandwidth, and also maintain stability of the signal for customer service. And one of the big determinants that affects this is the length of the customer's cable pair, or how much copper wire is involved in providing the customer service. Um, I'll kind of touch on that in a little bit. And the second other reason this was a kind of a frequent problem for us is when I used to work for the Evil Empire, which I shall refer to as from here on. Um, they wanted to be kind of the one-all and end-all for broadband service to customers. I mean, this was in the very late 90s, early 2000s, when basically internet kind of was really starting to take off, and more people wanted to be involved, and the limitations of dial-up and other services were being reached that customers were wanting more and more. And the Evil Empire wanted to be kind of the first thought, one-stop shop for what they thought the customers' needs would all be. And so a lot of that involved them trying to basically kind of get as many customers, quote unquote, qualified to be able to have service. And uh, this kind of involved a little bit of finagling on their part. Basically, let's kind of think of an example of a typical story here. Let's say your average customer that hears about this internet thing and wants to get involved. It's the new shiny out there. It's supposed to, offer new opportunities and everything. So they call their phone company and tell them, I would like to have a DSL. So the sales agent looks in the computer, and there is a lot of times a kind of a automated system that will pull up the records and say yay or nay. Um, at this point, there's kind of when things start going awry. And I say that in that the system, the automated system they try to use to, quickly determine a customer can have service or not, um, oftentimes we'll look up the records, but use what's referred to as a resistance equivalent to determine the distance of the cables or the cable loop, which um, you know the other terms are used to kind of describe the physical plant or facilities that are used to provide a customer service. And this resistance equivalent is a lot of times not exactly all that accurate because uh, basically one of the big determinants was the gauge of wire that was used. Um, if I remember right, I think it was like 14 or 16 gauge is used in many areas, and a lot of times interchangeably. So you may have a mix of one or the other as the phone company in the area may have rolled out cable bundles over the years, and may have spliced in or spliced out new or old wire, and so sometimes you get kind of a twisted spaghetti result of different types of wire that's given to customer service. So the resistance equivalent is not all that reliable. So, but from the sales agent perspective, all they're told is sell as much as possible and basically pass the problem down the road. The next step is when the customer is qualified in this situation. Um, the order is written to provide, add the additional elements in the network to the customer circuit to provide their service, and this order is then immediately sent over to the DSL vendor that the phone company or internet service provider is contracting through. Um, that's a discussion for another episode altogether. Um, and a lot of times the first department of these DSL vendors that were interact with this order is referred to as provisioning. Provisioning is unfortunately, since I worked in maintenance, most of the technicians I work with are kind of a little more derisive towards provisioning, and I try to be fair to my fellow coworkers, but in hindsight and after experience, I kind of have a little bit of negative attitudes, put it politely, towards a lot of what I saw happening coming from provisioning. But basically, what they would do is, find where in the network the proper elements are that can provide customer service, and add those to the circuit. Get the DSLAM assignments, the virtual mapping assigned, and make sure all the other people involved get their orders and told, wire this here and wire that there, and trigger all the other systems so that the customer can be billed when the service starts running. And a lot of times, especially in the later years, when I worked in this job, a lot of the system was even more automated, so that basically a lot of the technicians that worked in provisioning, all they had to do was kind of sit and watch their the tickets the work orders that are assigned to them get worked, and if there's any kind of red flags that pop up for whatever reasons, um, and once the due date comes and goes, the order's closed out. The customer is now supposedly an operating circuit, and should be happy eyes clams in the sand. But in many cases, the due date comes, the customer sets up their equipment in their homes, and kind of start realizing something's not working right. So since the circuit is now supposedly turned on and activated, they call their internet service provider, and the internet service provider kind of looks on things on their end and says, okay, well, let's open a trouble ticket to the DSL vendor and see what's going on. And in more cases than not, I often was the lucky technician who gets the angry customer berating me and in the company, trying to figure out what the heck's going on. And so with the remote set of tools that I had, I try to figure out what's going on. And see, in the early days when I first started working there, we didn't really have a certain, let's see, how we want to say this, parameters. Some of the parameters were kind of set really high because we were still kind of deploying DSL and kind of learning new things. When you take theory and suddenly apply it to real world situations, you kind of learn a lot more than you expected. And so I would take my set of remote tools, look at the line, do like one particular set of tools we had was called the mechanized loop test, which is basically some of the original sets of remote tools, and is almost older than dirt itself. And we'll look at the some of the basic electrical properties of the line, like tip, ring to tip to ring, tip to ground, ring to ground. Make sure there's no opens or shorts or whatever. And then we get a basic, kind of a little bit more of an accurate resistance value for the distance on the cable pair, and we start kind of get a rough idea what where we may need to start applying our attention to, find out what the problem is. And it's like in the early days, it's like if it was over 21,000 feet, we would automatically deny it then. But at a certain point, some years later, we started just, if it's over 18,000 feet, we started just, nipping it right there. Because at that point, there's almost no way we can provide service with that kind of distance. And so at that point, after, doing all these tests and everything, it was still, lucky me to have the job to tell the customer, I'm sorry for putting you through all this rigmarole and getting your hopes up, but there's really no way to provide you service. And again, I get a lot more of another earful, and that's kind of one of the frustrating things about the job, is how many times I've wound up having to do this over and over with so many customers. And a lot of it is because the evil empire wanted to try to turn on as many circuits as possible, and they decided that angering customers was kind of an acceptable risk. And but later on, I think it was like about 2002, maybe 2003. It had to be 2002. Around that point, the other phase is that the evil empire was trying to roll out more circuits and get more customers involved. They were running more fiber optic lines out to more areas, and the inside jargon for the project was called Project Pronto, but the terminology describing what we were doing is a remote terminal, or in some cases, another popular term was fiber to the hood or neighborhood, or kind of another term is fiber to the curb or to the premises. Um, Basically, what we did were running fiber optic lines out more and more and building up the network, and then trying to move our equipment closer to customers so that there would be less copper wire involved, and so, which means more bandwidth available for the customer. And in these cases, they were basically trying to roll out so much of this new equipment and so many remote terminals. They would often have dates for when these systems are supposed to be up and running, and when they place an order, the automated system was supposed to assign the customer to these remote terminals, but in many cases, the due dates of when the customer is supposed to have service and when the equipment is supposed to be online would match up. They would switch the customer over to be assigned to a kind of a more original deployment for DSL, and you can sort of have an idea of how that, what results in that, harming your customers. And we did everything we could in those cases to try to, put new due dates or try to move things. There were so many complications in an already complicated system that we had really no other choice but to deny service to the customer again. And that was kind of one of the really things I just really hated about my job, and that it was really unfair to the customer. It certainly weighed down on me hard because at the time I was just got out of college, and I was still not as cynical as I am today, and I was excited because I was working on the new technology of the future at the time, and yet I had to deal with a lot of these customers who were angry basically because of no fault on their own, but to kind of make up for the mistakes that that should have been caught well before they got anywhere near me. And so, and that's kind of my confessional for today. It's to any customer I've denied service to in the past, I'm sorry, but those were the conditions I was working under at the time. It was never personal. In fact, in many cases, I tried to do everything I could to, try to make up for the fault of someone else and see if there's still the way we can get customer service. But, when you're one little cog in a much bigger machine, there's not really too many options for you to make a change. And so, anyway, that's pretty much all I have to say about that today, and I'll catch you all later for another confessional. Bye.